In a time when fear and hatred ruled over a small, divided community, one figure emerged from the shadows, not with violence or anger, but with a quiet determination that would change everything. He was known simply as the Black Rider. His presence sent whispers through the streets, his dark silhouette cutting across the horizon like a storm waiting to strike. But the story of the Black Rider isn't just about a man on horseback. It's about the power of transformation, the power of one person to heal wounds that seemed too deep to ever mend. The town was a place steeped in resentment, where old grudges ran so deep that even the youngest children learned to carry the weight of hate. Neighbors turned against each other, families broken by years of distrust, and any attempt to bridge the divide only seemed to deepen the rift. It was as if the very air was poisoned with bitterness. People didn't smile at one another. They didn't talk. They just survived, trapped in their own misery. But then, one day, everything changed. The Black Rider appeared, his figure looming from the mist, like a ghost of the past. No one knew where he came from or what his purpose was. Some said he was a knight. Some said he was a wanderer from the farthest reaches of the land. All that was certain was that he was different from anyone they had ever seen. Cloaked in a black tunic, with a steely gaze and a mysterious air, he didn't speak much. Yet somehow, the community could feel the weight of his presence. It was as if this stranger knew something they didn't, something that could make everything right again. At first, the people of the town were skeptical. Why should they trust someone who looked so much like the very thing they feared? Fear had defined them for so long that it had become instinct. The Black Rider wasn't a man they could easily categorize. He wasn't an enemy, nor was he a friend. He was a question mark, someone who wasn't afraid to stand alone in the face of a community that had built walls around itself. Every day, the Black Rider would ride into town, passing by the weary faces of people too broken to even acknowledge each other. They couldn't understand him. And yet slowly, something began to change. It started with the children. They were the first to approach him, curious about the stranger who rode so fearlessly into their town. There was something about him, something in the way he carried himself, something that spoke to them without words. The Black Rider didn't force his presence on anyone. He simply existed, quietly, letting time do its work. At first, it was small. A child would wave, and he would nod. A few more would follow suit. The next day, another small gesture. Slowly but surely, the wall of hostility began to crack, just a little. The adults watched, unsure of what was happening. They couldn't comprehend it. How could something as simple as a glance from a stranger shift the mood of an entire town? But it wasn't just the children who began to change. The Black Rider's influence spread, first through the young, then to the old, the tired, and the angry. With every ride into town, his presence seemed to act as a reminder of something the townspeople had long forgotten: the power of compassion. There was no grand speech, no rallying cry, just a steady reminder that perhaps it was time to stop living in the past. What the Black Rider brought wasn't just hope. It was something far more powerful. He carried with him the seeds of forgiveness, and though he never asked for it, his actions led the people to reconsider their own actions, their own beliefs, and the way they treated each other. The people didn't just begin to smile again. They began to speak to each other. Old wounds started to heal, slowly at first, and then with a speed that left everyone amazed. It wasn't perfect. The town wasn't suddenly transformed overnight, but it was a start, and sometimes that's all it takes. As the days passed, the townspeople began to notice something else. The Black Rider's visits weren't just helping the community, they were also changing him. The man who had ridden in silence, cloaked in mystery, was starting to open up. His gaze softened, his posture relaxed. The weight of years of sorrow seemed to lift, little by little, as the town began to find its footing once more. But what was it that had caused such a shift in him? Was it the healing of the community, or was there something more to the Black Rider than anyone had realized? Yet, just when it seemed like the town might finally heal, a new tension began to build. Rumors spread like wildfire. There were whispers about the Black Rider's true intentions, about his past, about why he had come to the town in the first place. Some said he was a former soldier, haunted by the ghosts of a battle long fought. Others claimed he had a vendetta against the town's leaders. The questions grew louder, more insistent. What was the real reason behind his visits? Could the Black Rider truly be trusted? It was clear that the town wasn't out of danger yet. With every moment of healing came a shadow of doubt. And as the people began to open their hearts to each other once more, they were also opening the door to the past. A past that might be far darker than anyone could have ever imagined. The Black Rider knew what was at stake, but did he have the strength to face what was coming? And if he did, would the town be able to handle the truth that lay buried beneath the surface? The answers were still unknown. But one thing was certain. The Black Rider had already changed everything. The real question was, would the town be able to survive the truth that was about to be revealed? Stay tuned, because the next chapter of this story might just be the most shocking of all. As the days passed, the town seemed to shift beneath the Black Rider's presence. What had once been a place steeped in silence and coldness was now filled with an uneasy hum of conversation. People who hadn't spoken to one another in years began to exchange greetings, small gestures of kindness that for so long had been foreign to them. The cracks in the walls of distrust that had once seemed insurmountable were now wide enough for people to glimpse something different, something better. But while the people began to open their hearts, there was still a question that loomed over the town like a storm cloud. Why had the Black Rider come? Rumors spread like wildfire. Some of the older residents whispered that he was a hero from a war long forgotten. They said he had fought for a cause that had left him scared, not only physically, but emotionally too. Others were more skeptical, certain that his presence was part of a larger, more sinister plan. The town's leaders, who had remained mostly silent throughout the strange changes, grew uneasy. They had lived in power for as long as they could remember, feeding off the division and hatred that had kept the people under control. But now, with the Black Rider walking among them, their hold was slipping. It wasn't just the people who were changing, it was the very balance of power in the town. And that was something the leaders could not afford to lose. The town's mayor, an old man with a face as weathered as the stone walls that surrounded the town, had watched the changes unfold with a mixture of disbelief and fear. He had lived through the years of division and distrust, built a life on the backs of the resentment that had defined this place. The Black Rider was a threat, one he didn't fully understand, but knew all too well could unravel everything he had worked for. The mayor wasn't a man given to rush decisions, but he also wasn't a man who would let his authority slip away without a fight. One evening, as the sun began to set and the shadows stretched long across the streets, the mayor gathered a few trusted members of his council. They sat in a small room, the air heavy with the weight of the decisions that lay ahead. "Something has to be done," the mayor said, his voice rough like gravel. This man, this Black Rider is tearing down everything we've built. He's turning our people against us." One of the council members, a young woman with a sharp gaze, leaned forward. "I'm not so sure," she said quietly. "Have you seen how the people are changing? I've heard stories of families coming together again, of people actually talking to each other. We haven't seen anything like it in years." The mayor's eyes narrowed. "You think he's doing this for their good, or for his own?" The woman hesitated. She knew better than to openly defy the mayor, but the question troubled her. I think we need to understand why he's here. But I don't think he's here to destroy us." The room fell silent. The tension was palpable. The mayor's expression softened, just for a moment, before he spoke again more forcefully. "We can't afford to wait and see. If we don't act now, it'll be too late." And so the plan was set into motion. They would confront the Black Rider, demand answers, and if necessary, remove him from the town before he could cause any more harm. Meanwhile, the Black Rider himself was far from idle. He had sensed the rising unease among the town's leaders. But he was not here to fight battles of power. His mission was simpler, yet infinitely more complicated. He was here to heal, to undo years of pain and mistrust, to show the people that there was more to life than division and fear. But as the days passed, he felt the weight of his own past pressing down on him once more. The town, despite its progress, was still deeply scared. And what he had learned over the years was that no amount of goodwill could erase the shadows that lingered in the hearts of men every evening. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the Black Rider would ride out alone, seeking the solitude of the hills that surrounded the town. He would sit there for hours, watching the lights flicker in the distance, wondering if his presence had truly made a difference, or if it was all just an illusion. His thoughts were a tangled mess of memories, of battles fought and lost, of promises made to people who would never see the end of their suffering. He had been a soldier once, a man with a cause. But that man was long gone. In his place was a traveler, a stranger, searching for something he could never quite name. But there was something else in his heart now, something that had begun to grow with every passing day in the town. It was hope. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel it. He watched the people of the town, not just from a distance, but up close, and he saw their pain. He saw how they were all trapped by their own histories, unable to break free from the hatred that defined them. And he saw that they could change. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be quick, but it was possible. The tension in the town continued to grow as the mayor's plans moved forward. The Black Rider sensed that something was coming, something that would test everything he had worked for. And as the days grew shorter, and the nights darker, the day of confrontation finally arrived. It began with whispers. A crowd gathered in the square, a murmur of voices rising like a storm. The town's leaders had arranged a public meeting, and everyone knew what was about to happen. The Black Rider would be forced to answer for his actions. He would either explain his purpose or leave the town once and for all. As he rode into the square, the air was thick with anticipation. The people stood in tense silence, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. The Black Rider dismounted slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd, searching for the faces he had come to know. Those faces that had once been strangers, now so familiar. The mayor stepped forward, his eyes cold, his voice steady. "Tell us why you've come," the mayor demanded. "What is your true purpose in this town?" The Black Rider didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked around at the gathered crowd, at the people who had begun to trust him, to believe in what he represented. And then, for the first time in a long while, he spoke. "I came to help," he said softly. "But perhaps I've made a mistake." The words hung in the air, heavier than anyone could have anticipated. What did he mean by that? Was this all just a ruse? Was the Black Rider a hero, or something else entirely? The silence was deafening. And just as the tension reached its peak, a sudden, unexpected sound echoed through the square, a scream. The next moment, everything changed. The scream cut through the air like a knife, sharp and desperate. It came from the far end of the square, where a small group of children had gathered to watch the proceedings. The crowd turned, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. There, lying in the dust, was a young boy, his face contorted in fear. His hand clutched at his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Before anyone could react, the Black Rider was at his side, kneeling in the dirt. He didn't hesitate. The townspeople watched in stunned silence as the Black Rider cradled the boy in his arms, his face pale with concern. The mayor rushed forward, his authority suddenly forgotten in the face of the boy's apparent distress. "What happened?" the mayor demanded, his voice strained. The child's mother, her face a mask of terror, stumbled forward, her voice breaking as she spoke. "He was fine just moments ago. We were standing here, and then he." Her words faltered, and she fell to her knees beside the boy, her hands trembling as she touched his forehead. The Black Rider's eyes scanned the boy's body, and then he looked up at the gathering crowd. "He's been poisoned," he said, his voice calm, but heavy with weight. Someone in this town is responsible for this. A wave of shock rippled through the onlookers. A poisoned child? The very idea seemed impossible. But the Black Rider's words carried an undeniable truth. It was clear now, the town was in even greater danger than anyone had realized. The mayor's face turned pale, his earlier bravado gone. "We need to act quickly," he muttered, his mind racing. But the Black Rider wasn't listening. He was already on his feet, his gaze fixed on the crowd with a quiet intensity. "Who among you did this?" he asked, his voice booming in the stillness of the square. The crowd shifted uneasily, eyes darting nervously from one person to another. No one spoke, but there was something in the air, a sense of collective guilt, as if the very town itself was complicit in the act. And then, just as the silence seemed unbearable, an elderly man stepped forward. His hands shook as he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was me," he said. "I did it." Gasps of disbelief rippled through the crowd. The old man, once a respected member of the community, had lived in the town for as long as anyone could remember. No one could have imagined that he was capable of such a thing. But there he stood, his eyes filled with sorrow, his shoulders slumped with shame. "I thought it would end the madness," he continued, his voice breaking. "The hatred, the distrust. I thought if I could make them see what was happening, they would finally understand. I thought if I could strike at the heart of the town, make them realize the consequences of their fear, they would change." The Black Rider's eyes softened, but his expression remained sullen. "You poisoned the boy, to teach them a lesson." The old man nodded, his tears falling freely now. "I thought it would wake them up. That if they saw someone in pain, they would stop fighting, stop hating. But I was wrong. It only made things worse." For a long moment, the only sound in the square was the boy's labored breathing, the tension in the air so thick it seemed to suffocate everyone. The Black Rider didn't speak right away. Instead, he placed a hand on the old man's shoulder, his gaze never leaving the crowd. "You see," the Black Rider said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable power, "hatred begets hatred. Fear only breeds more fear. If you want to heal, you must start with yourself. You cannot poison your way to peace." The old man trembled under the weight of the words. He had hoped, in his own misguided way, that he could end the town's suffering by forcing it to confront its darkest impulses. But now, he saw how wrong he had been. His actions had only deepened the rift, and the town once again was divided. With a deep breath, the Black Rider turned toward the child's mother. "The boy will be fine," he said, his tone reassuring. "But the real poison lies in the hearts of this town. And until that is healed, none of you will be free." The mother nodded, her hands still trembling as she held her son. Slowly the crowd began to disperse, the weight of the moment heavy on their shoulders. There would be no easy answers, no quick fixes. The road to healing would be long and painful. But for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope, something to hold on to. The Black Rider didn't stay to witness the aftermath. He mounted his horse, his silhouette once again swallowed by the fading light of dusk. He had done what he came to do. The town's journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. But perhaps, just perhaps, the seeds of change had been planted. As the Black Rider rode off into the distance, the people of the town were left with a choice. They could continue down the same path, bound by fear and hatred, or they could rise above it, learning from the past, and begin to build something better. The decision was theirs to make. And as the final rays of sunlight faded from the sky, a single thought lingered in the hearts of all who had witnessed the day's events. Healing takes time, but it begins with a single act of courage. The Black Rider had shown them that much, and in that, he had already changed everything.